The night air shattered with a desperate scream as three masked men surrounded the old farmer. "Nobody's coming to help you out here," one sneered, brandishing a knife that gleamed in the moonlight. But as they closed in, a bone-chilling growl cut through the darkness. From the shadows emerged Atlas, a massive white Dogo Argentino. His eyes locked on the intruders, muscles tensed beneath his scarred coat. Before the thieves could react, the dog launched forward with terrifying, taking down the armed man with a single practice maneuver. The same takedown technique he'd used countless times as a police K9. The other thieves froze in shock as Atlas stood over their fallen accomplice, not with wild aggression, but with the calculated control of a trained officer. Before we continue, if you enjoy incredible stories about heroic animals protecting their owners, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. 6 months earlier, Miguel Alvarez stood at the entrance of the animal shelter, hands trembling slightly as he reviewed the adoption papers. At 67, the weathered farmer had lived alone on his small property for nearly 3 years since his wife's passing. The quiet had once been a comfort. Now it was just another reminder of his solitude. "He's a special case," the shelter worker explained, leading Miguel down a row of kennels. 4 years with the K9 unit before his handler was killed in the line of duty. The department couldn't reassign him. He wouldn't work with anyone else after that. Miguel nodded silently, understanding loss in a way few others might. He'd come looking for a companion, maybe a gentle older dog to keep him company during the long country nights. Instead, he found himself standing before a kennel containing the most formidable dog he'd ever seen. The Dogo Argentino sat perfectly still, watching Miguel with intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate everything about him. The dog's muscular white body bore several scars, badges of a life dedicated to service and protection. "His name is Atlas," the worker continued. "Retired early at 5 years old after his handler's death. Been here 8 months now. Most people are intimidated by his size and background." Miguel crouched down slowly, meeting the dog's gaze. There was no aggression there, just a profound sadness that Miguel recognized immediately. The look of someone who had lost their purpose. "Has he had any behavioral issues?" Miguel asked, not breaking eye contact with the dog. "None. He's impeccably trained. Follows commands perfectly. He's just waiting. It's like he's still on duty, waiting for orders that never come." The worker sighed. "Between us, he's running out of time here. Large dogs with specialized training don't usually find homes easily." Something shifted in Miguel's chest. He hadn't come looking for a police dog. He hadn't come looking for responsibility. Yet looking into those eyes, he saw something familiar. A soul adrift, just like his own. "I'll take him," Miguel said, the words surprising even himself. The worker raised her eyebrows. "Sir, with all due respect, he's not a typical companion animal. He's trained for police work, for tracking, for protection. Your farm is remote. Are you sure this is what you want?" Miguel nodded sedately. "We both need somewhere to belong. Maybe we can help each other find it." The first few weeks weren't easy. Atlas followed Miguel everywhere, constantly vigilant, sleeping only lightly at the foot of his bed. He obeyed commands with military precision but remained distant, as though physically present but emotionally still at his former handler's side. Miguel didn't push. He understood grief needed its own time. Instead, he talked to Atlas as he worked the farm, narrating his days, sharing memories of his wife Elena, explaining the rhythms of farm life. He told Atlas about the small orchard they'd planted together 30 years ago, about the vegetables he still grew using her methods, about the local farmer's market where he sold his produce each weekend. "Not much compared to police work," Miguel admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "But it's honest work. Keeps these old hands busy." Atlas rested his head on his paws, eyes scanning the property's perimeter as he always did. A sentry never truly off duty. 1 month into their arrangement, Miguel woke to find Atlas gone from his usual spot at the foot of the bed. Panic seized him as he searched the house, calling the dog's name. He found Atlas sitting by Elena's favorite rose bush in the garden, head tilted as though listening to something only he could hear. When Miguel approached, Atlas turned and looked at him with those intelligent eyes, and for the first time, the dog moved toward him voluntarily, pressing his broad head against Miguel's leg. "You miss your person too, don't you, boy?" Miguel whispered, kneeling despite his arthritic knees to run a hand over Atlas's scarred back. "Maybe that's why you ended up here. You understand." After that morning, something changed between them. Atlas began to relax into farm life. He would accompany Miguel into the fields, keeping watchful eyes on the surroundings while Miguel tended his crops. He would help herd the few chickens Miguel kept, moving with surprising gentleness around the birds. At night, he would lie closer to Miguel's bed, sometimes even allowing the old farmer to stroke his head before they both drifted off to sleep. Miguel's neighbors noticed the change in the farmer too. The hunched shoulders straightened somewhat. He spoke more at the weekend market, even sharing a laugh occasionally with regular customers. Having Atlas gave him purpose again. Someone to care for, someone who needed him. But not everyone viewed Miguel's improved circumstances with kindness. "Old man's got a vicious-looking beast now," muttered Darren Cole to his brothers as they watched Miguel load his truck at the farmer's market one Saturday afternoon. Atlas sat perfectly still in the passenger seat, his white coat gleaming in the sunlight. The Cole brothers had been trouble in the county for years. Petty theft, vandalism, the occasional strong-arm robbery when they needed quick cash. They'd had their eyes on Miguel's property for months. Remote, isolated, owned by an aging widower, it should have been an easy target. Probably all bark, no bite. The youngest brother, Jason, snickered. "Bet that old-timer can barely afford to feed himself, let alone that monster." Their middle brother, Eric, narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. "I heard some talk. That ain't just any dog. Word is it's some kind of retired police dog. Might complicate things," Darren scoffed. "Police dog or not, it's still just an animal. And we need cash. That old farmer's bound to have something stashed away, they always do. Besides, I hear he's been doing better at the market lately, making more sales." The brothers watched as Miguel carefully secured his remaining produce in the truck bed before climbing in beside Atlas. The dog's head swiveled in their direction briefly, eyes seeming to assist them before returning his attention to his owner. "Give it a week," Darren decided. "We'll see what we're dealing with, figure out the routine. Then we make our move." Unaware of the calculating gazes following him, Miguel drove home with Atlas, discussing the day's sales as though the dog could understand every word. In many ways, Miguel believed he did. "Good day today," he told Atlas as they turned down the long dirt road leading to the farm. "Sold almost everything. People seemed to like the new herb bundles." He glanced at the dog with a small smile. "Elena would be pleased. She always said our land had a gift for growing things." Atlas's ears perked up at Elena's name. He always seemed to recognize it now, as though he too were getting to know the woman who had shaped so much of Miguel's life. That night, as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Miguel felt a strange unease settle over him. He checked the locks twice before retiring to bed, something he hadn't done since those first raw months after Elena's death. Atlas seemed to sense his discomfort, patrolling the perimeter of the bedroom several times before finally settling down, though his ears remained alert to every sound. "Just being foolish," Miguel muttered to himself as he drifted off to sleep, one hand dangling from the bed to rest lightly on Atlas's back. The following week passed uneventfully. Miguel tended his crops, prepared for the next market day, and continued the slow process of bonding with Atlas. The dog had begun to show more personality. Miguel caught him playing with an old tennis ball in the yard, pouncing on it with almost puppy-like enthusiasm when he thought no one was watching. It made Miguel laugh for the first time in what felt like years. What Miguel didn't notice was the battered pickup truck that occasionally drove slowly past his property, or the figures that sometimes watched from the tree line as he and Atlas moved through their daily routines. The Cole brothers were nothing if not patient when planning a job. They observed the farmer's habits, noting when he was most likely to be working in the far fields, when he went to bed, how securely the house was locked. Most importantly, They watched Atlas, trying to gauge what kind of threat the dog might pose. "That ain't no ordinary farm dog," Eric insisted after their third day of surveillance. "You see how he checks the property boundaries? How he positions himself to always keep the old man in sight? That's training." Darren remained undeterred. "So he's trained, doesn't change the plan. We go in when the old man heads to town for supplies. He always leaves the dog at home. We'll handle the mutt, find whatever cash he's got stashed, and be gone before he gets back." Jason, always the most nervous of the three, shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. Something about that dog gives me the creeps. It's like he's always thinking." His brothers laughed at him, but the unease lingered. For days later, their opportunity arrived. Miguel loaded several empty crates into his truck, preparing for his monthly trip to the supply store in town. The brothers watched from their hidden position as the farmer knelt beside Atlas, giving what appeared to be instructions. The dog sat at attention, head tilted slightly as though processing every word. "Remember, no barking at the delivery truck if it comes," Miguel told Atlas seriously. "Mr. Hernandez is bringing the new irrigation parts, and I don't want you scaring him off like last time." Atlas huffed softly, as though offended by the reminder. "I'll be back in 2 hours," Miguel continued, patting the dog's broad head. "Guard the house, but be nice to Mr. Hernandez." With that, Miguel climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving Atlas sitting perfectly still in the driveway, watching until the vehicle disappeared from sight. "This is it," Darren whispered as they watched the dog finally turn and trot back toward the farmhouse. "We wait 30 minutes to make sure the old man doesn't come back for something he forgot. Then we move in." The 30 minutes passed with excruciating slowness. Atlas had disappeared inside the house through the dog door installed in the kitchen. The property was silent except for the distant clucking of chickens and the whisper of wind through the cornfield. "Let's go," Darren finally said, rising from their hiding spot. "Jason, you got the meat?" Jason nodded nervously, pulling a paper-wrapped package from his backpack. "Drummed just like you said. Should put the dog under in minutes." "Good. We toss it through the dog door. Wait for it to take effect. Then we're in and out in 20 minutes tops." The three brothers approached the house cautiously, moving in a wide arc to avoid being seen through any windows. The farmhouse was old but well-maintained, with fresh paint and solid shutters, a lifetime of hard work visible in every carefully tended detail. When they reached the back door, Jason unwrapped the meat and carefully pushed it through the dog door. They waited, ears strained for the sound of the dog taking the bait. Minutes passed. Nothing. "Maybe he's in another room," Eric whispered. "Let's give it a few more minutes." 5 more minutes crawled by. Still nothing. "Screw this," Darren growled, reaching into his pocket for a small toolkit. "Unpicking the lock. If the dog comes, we'll deal with it." As he knelt before the door, Jason and Eric positioned themselves on either side, makeshift weapons at the ready. The lock was simple, yielding to Darren's practiced hands in under a minute. The door swung open with a soft creak. The kitchen was empty, no sign of Atlas or the drugged meat. "Where the hell is the dog?" Jason hissed, eyes darting nervously around the room. "Split up," Darren ordered. "Jason, check the bedrooms. Eric, take the living room. I'll look for the safe or wherever he keeps his cash, and keep an eye out for that mutt." The brothers separated, moving through the house with the practiced quiet of experienced thieves. Miguel's home was modestly furnished but full of personal touches. Photographs of him and Elena throughout their life together, handmade quilts draped over chairs, well-worn books lining symbol shelves. Darren headed straight for the master bedroom, searching for the typical hiding spots: under the mattress, behind picture frames, in the closet. He found a small lockbox in the nightstand drawer and grinned triumphantly. Meanwhile, Jason moved cautiously down the hallway, pushing open doors with growing confidence. No dog. Maybe it had wandered off the property. Maybe their luck was finally changing. Eric was in the living room, stuffing small valuables into his backpack. An antique watch, a pair of silver candlesticks, a small wooden box that jingled with the promise of jewelry. The job was going perfectly, until they heard it. A low, sustained growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jason froze in the hallway, eyes wide. "Darren?" he called, voice barely above a whisper. "I think the dog's in here." "Well, find it," Darren shouted back, frustrated by the simple padlock on the box that was resisting his attempts to pick it. In the living room, Eric slowly turned in a circle, trying to locate the source of the growling. His eyes darted to the shadows beneath furniture, to the partially open closet door, to the hallway leading to the kitchen. "Tier, doggy," he called softly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Nice doggy. Look what I've got for you." He reached into his pocket for some beef jerky he'd brought as a backup plan. The growling stopped. Silence fell over the house. Then, in a blur of white muscle and precise movement, Atlas emerged from beneath a desk that should have been far too small to conceal his massive frame. Before Eric could react, the dog had clamped powerful jaws around his wrist, not biting down hard enough to break skin, but with enough pressure to make the message clear. "Don't move." Eric's scream brought his brothers running. Jason skidded to a halt in the living room doorway, eyes wide at the tableau before him. Eric stood absolutely still, face pale with fear, arm extended with the dog attached to it. Atlas's eyes were coldly intelligent, his body coiled with potential energy, ready to escalate if necessary. "Holy shit," Jason breathed. "Darren." The dog's got Eric. Darren appeared behind Jason, the lockbox clutched in one hand, a knife in the other. "Call it off," he demanded, as though speaking to a hidden owner. "Call your dog off now." But there was no one to call Atlas off. The dog's eyes flicked to the new arrivals, assessing the threat without releasing his hold on Eric's wrist. "Shoot it," Eric pleaded, voice tight with pain and fear. "Darren, shoot the damn thing." Darren raised the gun he'd kept tucked in his waistband, a last resort he'd hoped not to use. Before he could improperly, Atlas released Eric's wrist and moved with shocking speed. Years of police training coming to life in a fluid series of movements. The dog charged forward, staying low to the ground, making himself a difficult target. Darren fired once, the shot going wide as Atlas slammed into his legs with the force of a battering ram. The gun clattered to the floor as Darren fell heavily. The wind knocked from his lungs. Atlas didn't attack further. Instead, he positioned himself between the fallen man and the gun, teeth bared in warning. A clear tactical decision that spoke to his years of training. "Get the gun," Darren wheezed, trying to regain his feet. "Jason, get the damn gun." Jason lunged for the weapon, but Atlas was faster. The dog snatched the gun in his mouth and retreated several steps, holding it carefully by the grip, exactly as he'd been trained to disarm suspects during his police career. The Cole brothers stared in disbelief. This was no ordinary farm dog reacting on instinct. This was a trained professional executing a tactical response to an armed threat. "What the hell kind of dog is this?" Jason whispered, backing toward the door. Darren struggled to his feet, knife still in hand. "It's still 3 against 1, he snarled, though his confidence was clearly shaken. "Corner it." But Atlas wasn't playing by their rules. Still holding the gun in his mouth, he backed toward the landline phone on the side table, eyes never leaving the 3 intruders. With a nudge of his massive head, he knocked the receiver off the hook. Is it calling for help?" Eric asked incredulously, cradling his wrist. Before any of them could process this new development, Atlas set the gun down carefully out of their reach and let out 3 sharp, distinctive barks. Then 3 more, then 3 again. "What's it doing?" Jason asked, a voice rising with panic. Darren's face had gone pale. "It's sending a signal. 333. Officer needs assistance." His time in juvenile detention had taught him enough about police codes to recognize what was happening. "It's calling for backup." "There is no backup," Eric shouted. "We're in the middle of nowhere." But doubt had taken root. Atlas continued his tactical retreat, positioning himself where he could watch all 3 men while keeping himself between them and potential weapons or exits. "This isn't worth it," Jason said, edging toward the door. "Let's just go." "Not without the cash," Darren insisted, though his eyes never left the vigilant dog. "We came for a score, and I'm not leaving empty-handed," Atlas growled again, the sound rumbling through the room like distant thunder. What happened next would later seem like a blur to the Cole brothers. Atlas launched forward once more, this time targeting Darren directly. Instead of going for his knife hand as they expected, the dog executed a perfect takedown maneuver, hitting Darren square in the chest and sending him crashing to the floor. In seconds, Atlas had positioned himself over Darren, powerful jaws hovering mere inches from the man's throat. The message was unmistakable. "Stay down." Eric and Jason stood frozen, unwilling to abandon their brother, but equally unwilling to challenge the tactical precision of the dog that had systematically dismantled their plan. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the sound of tires on gravel outside. "Police!" came a shout from the driveway. Miguel Alvarez called in a possible break-in. "Come out with your hands up." The brothers exchanged looks of panicked disbelief. How had the police been notified? What they couldn't know was that Miguel had installed a silent alarm system after a small burglary the previous year, one triggered by the opening of his back door when the security code wasn't entered. The alarm had silently notified the rural police station and Miguel's cell phone. As footsteps approached the house, Atlas maintained his position over Darren, a white guardian angel with unblinking focus and unwavering discipline. Two officers entered with weapons drawn, taking in the scene with professional assessment. Three intruders, one subdued on the floor by a dog in a classic police hold position. "Well, I'll be damned," the older officer breathed, lowering his weapon slightly. "Is that Atlas?" The dog's ears perked up at his name, though he didn't relinquish his position. "You know this dog?" his partner asked, officially handcuffing Eric and Jason, who had surrendered without resistance. "Sure do. That's Officer Santiago's partner, or was, before Santiago was killed in that convenience store shootout last year." The older officer approached carefully, respect evident in his movements. "Atlas, release." "Good boy, release." Something in the commanding tone penetrated Atlas's focused intensity. The dog looked up, recognition flickering in his intelligent eyes. After a moment's hesitation, he backed away from Darren, allowing the officer to secure the last brother. "Never thought I'd see him again," the officer continued, reaching out slowly to let Atlas sniff his hand. Department tried to reassign him, but he wouldn't work with anyone else after Santiago. Too loyal. Heard he ended up at the shelter. Miguel arrived minutes later, his truck skidding to a stop in the driveway. He rushed inside, heart pounding with fear for Atlas. The scene that greeted him was surreal, three handcuffed men being led to police cruisers, officers gathering evidence, and Atlas sitting calmly in the center of the living room, seemingly standing guard over Miguel's scattered possessions. "Atlas," Miguel called, dropping to his knees as the dog bounded toward him. For the first time, Atlas greeted him with unrestrained affection, whining softly as he pressed his massive head against Miguel's chest. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" One of the officers approached, smiling at the reunion. "Your dog is quite something," Mr. Alvarez took down three armed intruders, secured a weapon, and held them until we arrived. Textbook police work. Miguel stroked Atlas's scarred back, tears welling in his eyes. "He was protecting our home. He was doing what he was trained to do," the older officer said, joining them. "I knew his handler, Officer Santiago, would be proud to see Atlas found his purpose again." As the police completed their work, taking statements and collecting evidence, Miguel sat on his porch with Atlas pressed against his leg. The dog seemed more relaxed than Miguel had ever seen him, as though some long-held tension had finally been released. "You were a hero today," Miguel told him softly, stroking the broad white head. "But you've always been one, haven't you? Even before today." Atlas looked up at him with those intelligent eyes, and Miguel could have sworn he saw understanding there. News of the incident spread quickly through the small community. The Cole brothers had been wanted for a string of burglaries and assaults across the county, and their capture was celebrated as a significant victory for local law enforcement. But the real star of the story was Atlas. The local newspaper ran a front-page article about the former police dog who had protected his elderly owner's home with professional precision. The story was picked up by regional news, then national outlets. Soon, Atlas became something of a celebrity, the loyal K-9 officer who found a second chance and a new purpose. Miguel found himself fielding calls from reporters and well-wishers. Several former K-9 officers reached out to share stories about working dogs finding new purpose in civilian life. A pet food company even offered a year's supply of premium dog food in exchange for using Atlas's image in an advertisement. Through it all, Atlas remained the same. Vigilant, loyal, but now more openly affectionate with Miguel. He no longer slept at the foot of the bed but curled up right beside his owner. He would lean into Miguel's touch, sometimes even initiating contact by placing his head on the old farmer's lap during quiet evenings on the porch. 6 months after the break-in, Miguel sat in that same spot, watching the sunset with Atlas beside him. The dog's head rested comfortably on his thigh as Miguel absent-mindedly traced the scars on his back. "You know what tomorrow is?" Miguel asked softly. "1 year since I brought you home." Atlas huffed softly, eyes half closed in contentment. "I went to the shelter looking for company," Miguel continued, his weathered hand gentle against Atlas's white coat. "Just a quiet companion for an old man. Instead, I found a guardian, a protector." He smiled down at the dog. "A friend." Atlas lifted his head, meeting Miguel's gaze with that same intelligent intensity that had caught the farmer's attention a year ago. But now there was something else there too. A warmth, a connection that transcended words. "Elena would have loved you," Miguel whispered. "She always said everything happens for a reason. I didn't believe her after she was gone. Couldn't see what reason there could be for such loss." He looked out across his fields, golden in the fading light. The land he and Elena had worked together for decades. The home they had built. The life they had shared. "But maybe she was right after all," he continued. "Maybe you and I were meant to find each other. Two souls who'd lost their purpose, helping each other discover a new one." Atlas pressed his head more firmly against Miguel's hand, as though agreeing with the sentiment. The following day, Miguel took Atlas to the small cemetery where Elena was buried. It was their first visit together. Miguel hadn't been able to bring himself to return since the funeral, but today felt different. Today he wasn't going alone. Atlas walked quietly beside him as Miguel navigated the peaceful paths between gravestones. When they reached Elena's marker, Miguel placed a bouquet of flowers from their garden. Roses, dahlias, and lavender, all her favorites. "Elena," Miguel said softly, "I want you to meet someone." Atlas sat beside him, solemn and attentive, as though understanding the importance of the moment. "This is Atlas," Miguel continued, voice thick with emotion. "He's been taking care of me, just like you ask someone to." He smiled through tears, "Always watching out for me, making sure I eat properly, get enough rest. He even gets me out of bed on the days when grief feels too heavy." Atlas leaned against Miguel's leg, a solid, warm presence anchoring him to the present, even as memories of the past swirled around them. "I think you would approve," Miguel whispered, reaching down to stroke Atlas's head. "He's given me purpose again, a reason to keep going." They stayed for an hour, Miguel talking softly to Elena about the farm, the village, the small details of daily life. Atlas remained by his side, occasionally scanning their surroundings with professional attention before returning his focus to Miguel. As they finally turned to leave, Miguel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Not the weight of grief, which would always be part of him, but the weight of loneliness that had made that grief so unbearable. "Come on, boy," he said to Atlas as they walked back to the truck. "Let's go home." At the farm, a surprise awaited them. Miguel's neighbors had gathered in his driveway, a homemade banner strung between two trees. "Happy Adoption Day, Atlas." It had been the neighbors' idea, a celebration to mark the 1-year anniversary of Atlas joining Miguel's household. They brought food, drinks, and even gifts for the dog who had become something of a local celebrity. Atlas received the attention with dignity, accepting gentle pats from familiar hands, politely taking offered treats, staying close to Miguel throughout the impromptu party. Later, as the guests departed and evening settled over the farm, Miguel and Atlas sat in their usual spot on the porch. The old farmer looked out over his land with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. "You know," he said to Atlas, "when I was a young man, I believed strength meant never needing help, standing alone against whatever life threw at you." He shook his head ruefully. "Elena tried to teach me otherwise. She always said true strength is knowing when to lean on others." Atlas shifted closer, his solid warmth a comfort against the cooling night air. "I think I finally understand what she meant," Miguel continued, resting his hand on Atlas's broad back. "We're stronger together, you and I. Different kinds of broken, maybe, but able to support each other where we're weak." The Dogo Argentino looked up at him with those intelligent eyes, and Miguel could have sworn he saw agreement there, understanding. In the year since Atlas had come into his life, Miguel had watched the dog transform from a vigilant, distant guardian to a true companion. The professional distance had given way to genuine connection. The police training remained. Atlas still patrolled the property boundaries every morning and evening, still positioned himself to monitor approaches to the house, still responded with alertness to unusual sounds. But it had been integrated into a new identity. Not just a police dog, not just a farm dog, something uniquely his own. Miguel had changed too. The neighbors commented on it. The customers at the farmer's market noticed it. He stood straighter, smiled more readily, engaged with the world again instead of merely moving through it. "We saved each other, didn't we?" Miguel murmured as darkness fell over the farm. "Both of us waiting for someone to see our worth beyond what we've lost." Atlas huffed softly, resting his chin on Miguel's knee. That night, as they settled into bed, Atlas now claiming his rightful place beside Miguel rather than at the foot of the bed, Miguel thought about the strange paths life takes, how loss can lead to unexpected connections, how endings can become beginnings if you're brave enough to take that first step. He reached out to stroke Atlas's head, grateful beyond words for the second chance they'd both been given. The dog sighed contentedly, eyes closing in complete trust. "Good night, my friend," Miguel whispered. "Thank you for finding me." As they drifted off to sleep, the old farmer and the former police dog, an observer might have noted how perfectly they complemented each other. The vigilance of youth and the wisdom of age, the protection of strength and the healing of compassion. Two souls who had lost their way, now helping each other navigate a new path forward. In the quiet farmhouse, surrounded by land that had sustained generations, they had created something neither could have found alone. Not merely survival, but a genuine reason to thrive. Not just a house, but a home again. Not just existence, but life renewed. And if shadows ever threatened that peace, whether in the form of intruders like the Cole brothers or the deeper shadows of grief and loneliness, they would face them as they now faced everything. Together,